girl has an affair with her two brothers. The two brothers must start a new life with the girl, but they need money, which leads them to choose the wrong path. This decision drastically changes everyone's lives. The movie begins with the main characters, Gina and Andy. After this, we see an old lady in a jewelry shop. After opening the shop, a man comes to rob her. He shows her a gun and demands the jewelry. The poor old lady is terrified. The robber also has the combination to the safe. The jewelry is kept in a glass box. The old lady gives him the key, but the glass doesn't break. The robber tries hard to break it. While he's distracted, the old lady grabs a gun and shoots him. The robber also shoots the old lady. His gun falls and he tries to escape, but the old lady shoots him again and kills him. The injured man stumbles out of the shop and his partner, terrified, runs away. The man who ran away is another main character named Hank. Now we learn Hank's backstory. A few days earlier, Hank had gone to watch his daughter's game. His brother Andy was also there. Hank loves his daughter very much, but he's divorced from his wife. These days, he needs a lot of money to support his child. Andy knows this. When Hank drops his daughter home, his wife yells at him for not providing money for the past few months. Hank wants to give his daughter a good education, so he's been trying hard to earn money. One night, Andy calls Hank to a bar and tells him he has an idea to make easy money. They can rob a place. Hank says, "This is a very serious crime. I can't do this." Andy replies, "It's not that serious. No one will be harmed or hurt. I know you need money, so you should do this job." Hank isn't ready for this, but he still asks for details. Andy says, "I won't give you any details until you agree." The next day, Hank goes home early from work. He's having an affair with Gina. At night, Hank went to see his daughters play. He felt very proud at that moment. His daughter mentioned that she had to go on a trip, for which Hank would need to pay $100. Hank agreed, but he didn't have the money. So he went straight to Andy, ready to hear about his plan. Hank said, "Once I tell you everything, you can't refuse." Andy then revealed that they were going to rob their parents' shop. Hank found this amusing, but Andy explained that the shop was insured. Whatever they stole, the insurance would cover the loss and their parents would get the money back. He assured Hank that no one would get hurt and that it was a foolproof plan. Hank was hesitant, so Andy handed him $2,000, saying, "See how much this solves your problems, then give me your answer." He emphasized that both of them would benefit greatly from the robbery and could start a new life. Later that night, Hank met with a bartender named Bobby, who he knew sometimes engaged in illegal activities. Hank convinced Bobby to join him and gave him some money, including $2,000 for Bobby's wife. When the day of the robbery arrived, Hank picked up Bobby from his house. Bobby had a wife and a young son at home. After breakfast, they left together. At one point, Hank stopped the car and put on a fake hairstyle to disguise himself. Bobby, who seemed more experienced, told Hank, "You've never done this before. Let me handle everything. Just stay in the car and be ready to drive when I come out." Bobby brought a disc with him, and after listening to it, he prepared for the robbery. As it turned out, the old lady at the shop ended up killing Bobby. Terrified, Hank removed his disguise and called Andy. Meanwhile, in a flashback, we learn more about Andy. He was struggling financially and had started using drugs at work. During a meeting, his boss informed him that the IRS was going to audit him, revealing a major fraud Andy had committed. Stressed, Andy went to a drug dealer to get high. He lamented, "Everything here runs on a system, but my life has no system. It's completely ruined." The drug dealer suggested he talk to his wife, Gina, about his problems, but Andy never shared his struggles with her. This lack of communication began to strain their relationship. Andy proposed to Gina that they move back to Brazil to escape their troubles. He was even willing to learn the language and put in the effort to start fresh. Gina liked the idea, and it brought a glimmer of hope to their strained romance. The next day, Andy went to a shop where illegal jewelry was bought. He spoke to the shop owner and asked, "Do you still do this kind of work?" The old man, suspecting Andy might be a police officer, checked his card and then said, "You can do your research about me." After this, Andy prepared Hank for the job. When everything went wrong, Andy received a call from his father's hospital. Upon arriving, he discovered that his mother had passed away. It turned out that there was no other old lady working in the shop. It was his mother. She was now completely unconscious and later slipped into a coma. There was supposed to be a different old lady working at the shop. How did this happen? The answer lies in the events of the previous night. His father's name was Charles, and his mother's name was Nanette. On the day of the robbery, Charles had an eye exam scheduled, so he was planning to go there. However, that night, Nanette received a call. The old lady who usually worked at the shop had to leave for another task, so Nanette decided to take over the shop while Charles went for his eye exam. After his checkup, Charles returned to pick up Nanette. Meanwhile, the police arrived at the shop. Seeing Nanette in such a state, Charles was devastated. The doctor informed him that his wife was brain dead and that nothing more could be done to save her. Hank couldn't handle the situation and left the hospital. The next day, Bobby's photo was published in the newspaper. Disturbed by this, Charles exclaimed, "How could anyone do this?" He went to the police to gather more information but received no help. Despite conducting his own investigation, he couldn't uncover anything. A few days later, Andy told Charles that they would have to make a decision about his mother. "We can't keep her alive on machines forever," he said. Eventually, Nanette's funeral took place. Overwhelmed with guilt, Hank left quickly after the funeral. Charles tried calling the police officer again, but no one answered his calls. Frustrated, he gave up on the police. In a flashback, we learn what Hank did after the robbery. He wiped all his fingerprints from the car and claimed he had rented it, so he returned it to the rental company. He received a call from his daughter, who had asked him for $100 earlier. Hank still hadn't given her the money, and since he was broke, his daughter treated him poorly. That night, Hank met with Andy, who was furious. Andy asked, "Can the police trace this back to us?" Hank assured him it wouldn't happen, as he had rented the car and there would be no issues. However, when Hank returned home, he received a call from the car rental company informing him that a CD had been left in the car. This CD belonged to Bobby, and Hank panicked. The next day, Hank went to the rental office, but the owner wasn't there. The staff didn't pay much attention to his request, and he still didn't have the CD. Later that night, while Hank was at a bar, Bobby's wife arrived with her brother Dex. Dex says that Bobby went with you to take the car. You had some work? And after that, he died. Now I give you two options. First, we can go to the police, otherwise you can give me some money. He was demanding $10,000 to stay away from him. If he didn't pay, Dex would kill him. He was in serious trouble. Hank goes to his ex-wife and asks her for money, but she gets even angrier. She says, "You should be giving me money, and now you're asking me for it." Hank, feeling hopeless, tries to commit suicide by taking pills, but he can't go through with it. After leaving the funeral, Hank calls Gina. He wants to meet her, but Gina refuses. She says, "Andy needs me." The next day, he goes to the car rental shop and asks for his ID, but he had rented the car under a different name. Since he can't provide his ID, this could have caused trouble. However, he gives them his credit card instead. He gets the CD back, and Andy's story moves forward again. When Andy's mother got hurt, she discovered he had committed fraud. She started receiving calls from the office, and Andy, overwhelmed with tension, went to his drug dealer. But since he didn't have an appointment, the dealer wouldn't let him in. After the funeral, Andy's father talks to him. He says, "I have always treated you badly. I was afraid you would turn out like me. I wanted you to be better than me." He was apologizing. Andy replies, "I was never part of your family." In anger, Charles slaps him. Later, Andy returns home with Gina, breaks down and tells her, "I never wanted to be like my father. That's why I never shared my problems with you. I'm really scared about our relationship." Gina senses that something is wrong. Andy prepares to leave for the office, but Gina says, "You shouldn't go today. If I'm not here when you come back, what will you do?" She was warning him, but Andy didn't understand. When he returned, Gina had packed her things and was ready to leave. She tells him, "I don't know anything about your life. You never tell me what's going on. You don't pay attention to me. I'm having an affair with someone else." Andy is devastated. Before leaving, Gina says, "He's your brother." Meanwhile, Charles decides to conduct his own investigation. Being in the jewelry business, he knows illegal jewelry is being sold. He visits the same old man Andy had met earlier and asks, "Are you still in the same business?" The old man responds, "You always thought you were different, but you don't understand how the world works. People will do anything for money." As Charles is about to leave, the old man hands him Andy's card. Charles is shocked. He understands everything now. Hank calls Andy and informs him about Dex. Now, Andy needs $10,000. He packs his things, ready to flee the country. He goes to the office to collect his money, but Charles starts following him. Andy tells Hank, "Let's go meet Dex." Hank protests, "If we give him the money, he'll keep blackmailing us forever." Andy replies, "Finally, you're thinking straight. Let's talk to him and see what happens." Hank asks, "How will we get $10,000? Andy takes him to his drug dealer. Upon arrival, Andy brutally beats the dealer. Inside, a client is present. Andy shoots and kills him. Hank is terrified. Andy then empties the dealer's locker, taking all the money. On the way out, he shoots and kills the drug dealer as well. Hank yells, "We didn't have to do this." Andy replies, "The dealer was after us with his gang. We couldn't take the risk." They head straight to Dex. Andy shows him the money and then pulls a gun on him. After checking the money, Andy shoots and kills him. At home, Bobby's wife is present. Andy is about to kill her too, but Hank stops him, saying, "You can't do this. If you want to kill her, you'll have to kill me first." Andy smirks and says, "That's not a bad idea. I know about you and Gina." Hank admits, "I made a terrible mistake, but if you kill me, you'll regret it." Before Andy can pull the trigger, Bobby's wife grabs a gun and shoots Andy instead. Andy, severely wounded, tells Hank to leave. Before leaving, Hank drops some money for him. As Hank exits the building, Charles sees him and chases after him, but Hank escapes. The police arrive and rush Andy to the hospital. Andy tells Charles, "We weren't planning to take any guns. No one was supposed to get hurt. Things just spiraled out of control." Charles puts Andy to sleep. Then he places Andy's death certificate on his chest so that no one in the hospital questions anything. After that, he kills him. He makes it look natural, then walks out and calls the nurse. Meanwhile, Hank and Gina flee to another country. The movie ends with a lesson. The path of crime never leads to a good ending. Everyone has to pay the price.